Hello and welcome to another edition of Clifton's Clicks, your Cliff Notes to the Cosmos. As always, I am your host, Clifton Smith, and I greet you with so much love and respect, gratitude, appreciation, motivation, and adoration. So, sponsor, water, yes. I'll drink it maybe a little bit later. Not so parched right now. Um, From last episode, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was that there are other ways in your bedtime routine that you can elevate your vibe. And one of those ways is mantras, right? Mantras is one of those elements that you can elevate your vibe on many different levels and dimensions, but it's definitely at its core something that'll elevate your vibe, as well as prayers, right? I grew up and I taught to say my prayers before bedtime, and prayers actually can elevate your vibe, right? And so it's a beautiful activity outside of the technology-esque get on a sound lounge thing that you can do to elevate your vibe before you go to bed as well as when you wake up. So what's great is there's many different tools and practices at our disposal that don't cost a thing. So wanted to add that onto it because it was very important. So today we're going to talk about credit system and cycles of poverty, as well as space programs. So two very different topics, and let's get into them. So credit and cycles of poverty. So in studying at business school, one of the things they talked about was cycles of poverty that occur around the world. And these are mechanisms that society and business has constructed to keep people in a low vibe and in a constant state of poverty, meaning they can't escape it. And people at the UN with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, they talk about systematically going through and finding those biggest cycles of poverty to help society thrive. One of which is not having readily available access to clean water, right? Because if you don't have water, you got to go get water, right? And so in many parts of the world, people have to spend an hour, 2 or 3 just to go and get water. And when you spend that much time getting water, you're not spending that time doing other things like working or educating yourself, or nurturing your children, or you name it, things of that nature, right? And so by providing fresh water, you immediately up level and upgrade the vibration of the society of these areas where they are stuck, constantly getting fresh water and spending a lot of their waking time getting water. And so no matter what is done, if they spend all their time getting water, then they can't use that time elsewhere, for work or for education, and to build a more powerful and higher vibe society, because they're all just spending it getting water. Another one is egregious credit and interest rate loans. So for people who are looking to create a business, generate revenue and livelihood for their family, sometimes it requires getting a loan or a capital to invest in the company, or to get like a cart or a horse for a wagon for your food that you're selling, and even for some people, they take a loan just to buy food from a farm to go sell it in the city. And the challenge with that is that the lending practices follow your traditional business model, which is to assess the risk involved and apply a specific interest rate to that type of risk. And what's challenging is because it's a risky venture, these companies and individuals are charging a high interest rate. And that interest rate makes it prohibitive to actually, for individuals to actually move to a better socioeconomic standing. And sometimes the terms are kind of hidden, so 1% loan a day, there's some out there where they go borrow money and then use that to buy food to sell, and they owe the lender 1% of what they borrowed. But that's 1% for one day, which when you stack it up is an interest rate of almost 356%, which is very prohibitive. Not to mention that if there was ever a case, and there often are, in which these individuals are unable to sell their produce, they're unable to pay back the lenders, and therefore they start to incur a really high interest rate. And throughout U.S. history, we've seen that happen, in which there were established indenture servitude as well as these work-live programs where everything was designed and it cost such that you really couldn't escape the community that you were working in because you couldn't save enough to do so. And then also there's the subprime mortgage crisis, right? That has happened in the credit state where we extended we went the opposite way. We overextended credit to individuals to purchase homes that did not have the financial capabilities to pay it, and so the loans failed, and it created a ripple effect that kind of really shook the collective American economy for several years. And so when you look at credit and lending, how can we apply a high vibration or a vibrational awareness view to that? In some religions, it's prohibited to actually charge an interest rate for lending. And what's interesting in modern society is that they found ways around it, where you purchase things and immediately sell it back at a higher price, which essentially is a de facto insurance rate. But it's really the business mind corrupting the spiritual practices and teachings. But nonetheless, credit has been used as a very positive aspect to build incredible infrastructure and development in society, as well as it's kept people in poverty. And one of the biggest, or one challenging discussion or modern discussion right now that's happening is about student loans, the enormous debt incurred about that. And then also on the other side, in China, you have a social currency rating system in which loans are distributed based off of your social behavior. And of course, there's Black Mirror episodes about how that could go terribly awry. So the financial instrument in and of itself is not negative. It's actually can be a very positive thing. It is simply a tool that our collective consciousness can use. And so the question is, how can we use it in a high vibrational state, as well as make it a tool that actually elevates the vibration of society? And so the first part is all about, similarly with business, as has been discussed, is what's the intention behind it? And what is your energetic state when you go about conducting your business and in that lending? Are you thinking about your customers as incredible humans and souls that you're connected to, who are passionately looking to create a future? Or are they just another random number that you're looking to have buy your financial product, and you could care less? Or even worse, do you look at them as the dregs of society who need to borrow money? All of those thoughts about who your customer is and how you view them impacts, your company and the vibrational state and energetic state of your credit lending company. The next aspect is, how do you view credit? Is it one of those things where you're trying to maximize the return and observe how you can squeeze the most amount of interest out of people? Or are you looking at it from a very respectful place where you're the steward of that money, and you recognize that the more successful loans you can give to people, the more money you'll have to provide more loans to more people, which then you can actually amplify people's dreams with that technology. And therefore, you make sure that the interest rate adequately protects the capital so that it can grow and amplify its results. So I would look at that, like, how do you set the interest rate and what are you looking at the interest rate for? Then the next step is how do you deal with your investors? Where do you get the capital from? Have you received it from low vibe activities? I know there's a lot of lending out there that is not on paper, right? That there might be the dark economy that money is from. So have you accepted that capital from a high vibe state? Are these investors who really believe in a high vibe use of the funds? Or is it simply like, here's the money and go make more money and not care about it? Or even worse, here's a bunch of money, don't ask where you got it from, let's try to launder it through these loans, things like that, right? And what you can do is you can break down every aspect of the business from a vibrational standpoint and see where you lie on it. And you can actually do a vibrational aware checklist to see just how positive your company actually is. Because once again, that credit and issuing credit is a tool, and it's a tool that can lift and elevate the vibe of societies, or it can crush and keep people in a low vibe state. Another thing is, how do you approach your customers who have defaulted or have challenges on those loans? Do you immediately send the lawyers in and seize their assets? Do you try to connect with the individual and recognize where they're at and provide assistance? Do you, and then on the other end, do you fall backwards and have no spine to collect, right? You're not going to be in business very long if that's how you act. But it's also a recognition that the role of credit and the role of lending is just that. It's to ensure that the contract is enforced and to be very clear on those terms going into it, having the highest vibe thought process about constructing the terms in the contract, having the highest vibe gathering the capital from your investors or your lenders that you yourself are borrowing from, having the highest intention of attracting the right customers, and then having the highest vibe intention of what's the best interest for the customer and the company if it comes into a case of default. And recognizing too that in those very moments of default is the greatest opportunity for creativity, in which it is so vital and important to actually keep a high vibe state, because that is what's going to provide a truly collaborative resolution, rather than simply compromise or one winner take all in those cases. And if, as the credit lender, you are actually able to do vibrational alchemy with the borrower, that is actually a beautiful skill. Because a borrower who defaults, and you've gone through the process, you've vetted them and they've believed in themselves and their journey for whatever they borrowed the money for, if they've hit some setbacks, then you know that they're facing their creditors. They're going to be in a low vibe. And of course, you being the lender, your job is to is to honor the pool of capital and get it from them as best you can, right? And save the loan. And so if you can actually elevate their vibes and put them into a high vibe state in those moments, you actually are able to increase your chances of actually receiving that capital back, as well as elevate the vibe of that individual, right? It's the same thing of like, if your boss sent you to go do something and you failed, and you come back, if your boss beats you with the stick, you're going to be even more sad. And going into that meeting with the boss that you're going to get in trouble, or like you failed, so you're already feeling down. So yeah, you can hit them with the stick, or you can fall, bend over backwards, like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's okay, which I don't advocate for at all. But you can actually use those moments to alchemize and change a more spiraling downward experience into a spiraling upward experience, where you can actually encourage them and shift the vibe of the situation through motivating them and seeing room for incredible collaboration to not just resolve the issue, but to create an even better outcome than there was before. And so that's what I would like to say about credits and credit systems and companies that may have had a bad rap to it. And once again, it's about putting in love and respect in every aspect of your business and honoring the business as an entity and an energy. And that includes your investors and your customers. And in those moments that are very clear in the lending business, where you have a potential downward spiraling low vibe activity, such as default and facing the customer who's defaulting, you can use that, and that is the best time to alchemize a low vibe situation into a high vibe situation. And the tactics, tools, and abilities to do that, I can get into maybe later or in a one-on-one discussion. So with that, I want to leave you thinking about these businesses that may have low vibe aspects to it, to see how we can actually alchemize them into high vibe companies, because they play a role in society. And of course, as society evolves, those roles may no longer be necessary, and that's great. But in the meantime, how do you deal with it? Of course, we want to build the fastest ship possible, but we're all currently in this one ship that's going really slow and it's got a hole in it. Well, what do? You plug the hole first, right? You don't just jump out of the ship and just kind of put your hands up in the air and say, oh, I give up. I'll come back when the new ship's built, right? So with that, the final one I'll leave for another day, which is answering someone's question about DNA, space, and things of that nature. So for this, I will keep it specifically on the business approach of vibrational awareness as it applies to potentially negative vibrational businesses, but seeing really truly how it can be a positive. And we'll leave it at that. So similarly to currency, it is a tool. It does eventually have energetic ties to the origination of the currency, but short of that macro perspective and meta perspective in our day-to-day life, how can we use it? We can use it for high vibe things and to promote a high vibe future. So with that, I'll leave you with much love, respect, gratitude, and appreciation. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.